Hello and welcome to our message for today. Let's start with a prayer. God, as we gather here today in various different places of the unknown, we ask that you would guide us and lead us, that the words of my mouth and the meditation of our hearts will always be acceptable and respect you. You give us strength. You give us courage. So let me begin by asking a question. How do you measure life? It's a great question in today's experience of social distancing when you think about it. Do we measure life by what we have or what we don't have? Maybe it's because we have a lot of toilet paper or less than any toilet paper. How do we measure our life? Maybe it's by how the way we surround ourselves with the people we care and love, or maybe it's those people we wish we could surround ourselves with. This passage from Mark's Gospel is all about social distancing, about keeping one's distance between, in this case, from the haves and the have-nots. In this context, Jesus is speaking to and about the religious officials who were walking around in their large robes. They wanted to be greeted in such a certain way of honor. They wanted to have the best seats in the dining halls and gatherings where they could give their long-winded prayers and speeches. Now, the irony of their behavior lies in what Jesus is teaching previously when someone official comes up to him and asks, and he says, "Which commandments is the most important of all?" Well, Jesus says, you've read them. You know what they are. Love the Lord your God with your heart, with your life, with your mind, and with your strength. Oh, and love your neighbor as yourself. But what they do is far from loving their neighbor in the first place. What they do is more like loving themselves. Consider the widow that we read about. The story of the widow's mite that's included in our text, it's not an illustration about the rich versus the poor and trying to bring on this big, huge guilt trip. Rather, it's a commentary against those who were in positions of religious authority. The religious authorities of Jesus' day were taking advantage of and profiting from the widows of the day. When we read about what Jesus was observing in the act of those worshipers that were coming to the temple, they were giving their offerings in such a unique way to Yahweh. The location of these offerings were not in the pews that we're accustomed to with the passing of the plate. Rather, the location of this offering was basically placed outside of the temple proper in an area which is kind of like our narthex. There would have been an offering plate for each of the different tribes that you represented. And so when people would come up there, everybody could see what was going on and taking place. It's said that these offering devices were shaped very much like a brass trumpet with a bell, so that when you came by and you tossed your offering into it, there would be this audible sound that would be rattling away and clanging away as it fell down into the actual coffer where the offering was collected. So now you can imagine. Those with a large sum would bring a whole handful of their offering and throw it in there, and it would be rattling and clanging away and almost making this musical sound of offering. And then someone like the widow comes along, throws in her 2 cents worth, and there's just this clink, clink. It's probably more louder than the rattling of the great offerings of others as others turn around and go, who is giving hardly anything at all? What makes this widow's gift more significant is that she gives all she has. It's a sacrifice of her all. Now, while those with large sums could give whatever they want, they weren't giving, as Jesus would say, out of a sacrifice or out of a loss. That was something they had around anyway in the first place. They were like the religious authorities of the day who were focused upon themselves. This Lent, we've been trying to explore how at times we get stuck in our faith to the extent how we feel frozen ourselves. Therefore, we ask the question, how do we get unfrozen? How do we get back into that place where we're alive in our faith, where we're warm in the Spirit? Our theme today is All is Found. Now, All is Found is another song from the Disney movie Frozen 2. All is Found is this lullaby that Anna and Elsa's mom first sings to them when they're just children. The words themselves seem to capture and tell of a place far away, but it's a place where in the means of oneself, they discover who they are. The words go like this, and I'm not going to sing it for you, but let me read them for you. Where the north wind meets the sea, there's a river full of memory. Sleep, my darling, safe and sound, for in this river all is found. In the waters deep and true lay the answers and a path for you. Dive down deep into her sound, but not too far, or you'll be drowned. Where the north wind meets the sea, there's a mother full of memory. Come, my darling, homeward bound. When all is lost, then all is found. I like to think that the widow's mite that she places into her offering is that same woman who loses the coin. You remember her? Where she turns her house completely upside down as she starts sweeping under tables and other things and under the carpet to be able to find this lost coin. And what happens when she finds it? There's a celebration. There's much joy to be brought about that she tells the people around her. But maybe the big celebration is this. Maybe it's at this point that she could give it away. That she could give it away as this widow does in the gift of her offering. Maybe it's in this act where she finds her own measure in life. You see, in looking for what in looking for what gives us meaning, often we might begin to find ourselves. And this is where all is found. And this is where we find the measure and value of things like love, service, and friendship. All those things that in its own way seem to be surfacing anew again. Have you noticed? People are beginning to talk to each other again. They're writing letters. They're picking up the telephone. People are going grave distances across the internet to connect face to face with people. There's this yearning to touch again, to give of our last bit, to know the significance of how we measure up to the gift we are to others as they are the gift to us. All is found because it's found in you. Thanks be to God. Amen.